The mayor's choice to lead the Civilian Office of Police Accountability has caused some controversy with city council members. That and much more in Spotlight Politics. Joining us are, of course, Heather Sharon, Amanda Vinicky, and Paris Schutz. Welcome back, team. We know that Alderman Ray Lopez, he blocked Mayor Lori Lightfoot's nomination of Andrea Kirsten from becoming from interim COPA chief to the position permanently. This is after COPA recommended that slain Chicago police officer Ella French be suspended in a report that was finished months before French was killed in the line of duty. So Heather, let's start with you, please. Alderman Lopez sent the Kirsten nomination to the Rules Committee for further debate. We all know that that's where measures go to die. Is the mayor's nomination going to be defeated there?
Well, it could be, and we asked Mayor Lightfoot about that after the city council today, and she said that she picked Andrea Kirsten because she was the best qualified of the people who applied and that she had her full support. But she also said that Andrea Kirsten is going to have to apologize for including Ella French's name in that report, which, as you said, was completed in April. Ella French was killed in the line of duty in August. And this report we saw last week because that was when Superintendent David Brown acted and announced that he was seeking to fire the sergeant who was in charge of the raid at Anjanette Young's apartment. Of course, we all remember that images of her left naked and begging for help while she was handcuffed. So that's where this all comes from. We will have more on this story tomorrow. Andrea Kirsten is scheduled to address the Chicago Police Board, and I expect her to address these issues then.
Okay, more to talk about then for sure. Meanwhile, there was a separate proposal, Heather, from Alderman Lopez that Alderman Jason Irvin blocked to change COPA's rules to prevent them from suspending a deceased officer. Why did Alderman Irvin block it?
So Alderman Irvin is a close ally of Mayor Lori Lightfoot. So this was no doubt a little bit turnabout is fair play, but also Alderman Lopez's ordinance wouldn't have really affected this issue because, again, the report was completed in April and Ella French sadly was killed in August. So this report, and I expect that Andrea Kirsten's going to make this point tomorrow, is going to say we had no authority to go back and change this report. And in fact, doing so could sort of complicate the integrity of our investigations. So it's very complicated. And there's no doubt that aldermen like Raymond Lopez have seized on this issue as a way to really sort of complain about COPA, which has just a full deck of alleged police misconduct that it's examining, including the Anjanette Young raid, which of course was a major controversy.
Okay, so moving on. Did the Latino caucus chair offer a city ward map deal to the chair of the Black Caucus on Chicago Tonight last night? Take a look.
From the Black Caucus can draw 18 wards legally and allowing the Latino caucus to have 15 seats. That is something definitely we would be willing to entertain.
This is the first time that my colleague has stated what he has stated, and that's a challenge. And I'm going to ask my cartographers to see if they're able to meet the challenge that he has put on the table.
Now, Heather, back to you. Does the Remap Math add up there?
I don't think it does. I think if there was a ward map that you can draw with 18 wards with the majority of Black voters and 15 wards with the majority of Latino voters, it would be over and we would all be getting ready for Thanksgiving with a clear deck. But that I don't think is possible. It's also complicated by the commitment of both the Black caucus and the Latino caucus to create a ward centered around Chinatown that would have a majority of Asian American voters. So math was never my strong suit in school, but I don't think it adds up. And that's why I expect this to come down to the wire November 30th. The deadline is December 1st, and why it may ultimately end up in the hands of Chicago voters via a referendum.
So to that end, Amanda, the new map needs 41 votes by December 1st. Is it possible that they won't reach an agreement?
By December 1st, and you had the mayor today calling for there to be an agreement before that because she wants to follow through on these campaign pledges of transparency and bringing in the light and making a proposed deal public for you, me, all residents of Chicago to be able to glance at and weigh before there is an actual vote. It's hard to predict what, of course, the city council members are going to do, but I would say they are going to have the notion of passing this to a referendum means that they're going to be giving up control. So instead, you have both sides fighting super hard and publicly trying to tell their own constituencies, which are not just the voters and residents, but anybody who's politically involved. They're fighting really hard, but they're going to do their darndest to get a deal by then, so they do not leave it to voters / to chance.
Okay, so Paris, bringing you in, it seems like, if there's an agreement about adding an Asian ward for the first time, but with the Black and Latino caucuses, still wrestling over their own interests, how can they add an Asian ward, and who would have to be drawn out?
Well, I would probably come at the expense of wards with majority white voters or white ethnic voters. And there's a couple other unhappy campers here with the map that the Latino caucus has put forward. One of them, 14th Ward Alderman Ed Burke, because allegedly in this map, the remaining white part of his ward would be drawn out, and it would be almost entirely Hispanic. It's majority Hispanic right now, but he doesn't have a very strong support base in the Hispanic community, so it would make re-election very tough for that 14-count indicted Alderman Ed Burke. And then there's 34th Ward Alderman Carrie Austin, also under indictment. She would be completely drawn out of the 34th Ward. So those are some of the individual unhappy campers that are also probably trying to hold this up a bit.
Okay, so Chicago Police Union boss John Catanzara, he quits the CPD during his own termination hearing. Here's what Mayor Lightfoot said about it on our show Monday.
It's not surprising to me at all that John Catanzara saw the writing on the wall. He has disgraced himself and disgraced the department. And I think that there was a very strong case that was going to be made against him. So it's not surprising to me that he didn't want to face accountability for his own conduct.
Now, Heather, John Catanzara was unapologetic on the witness stand. Remind us why he's facing termination and why he thinks running for mayor is the next logical step.
Well, John Catanzara was accused of making obscene and bigoted Facebook comments. He targeted Muslims, and he targeted people who were protesting police misconduct. He was also accused of filing a false report against now disgraced former police superintendent Eddie Johnson. And I keep reminding people this was actually the third time that the Chicago Police Department had tried to fire him. So this was really the end of a long checkered career, but he's not going anywhere because he's still president of the police union and he has political aspirations.
So Paris, Catanzara, he also wrote, quote, "Finally, let's go Brandon," in the remarks section of his retirement paperwork. What does that mean?
Well, the "Let's Go Brandon" thing, I think I don't have to go into the derivation of that meme. It's a meme that is a euphemism for F Joe Biden. So folks that don't like Joe Biden, it's popular in right-wing media circles and social media. So it proves that Mr. Catanzara is a very active consumer of that kind of media. And he's also trying to spin this whole situation as a positive for him because it does seem like the writing was on the wall. And rather than get fired by the police department, he's going to say, hey, I'm just going to go on my own accord.
Okay, so here's what Mayor Lightfoot, here's what she said about Catanzara running against her.
It would be a gift.
In all seriousness,
In all seriousness, it would be a gift.
if he would run.
Let him run. I'd have a lot of fun with that.
Let him run, she said. Amanda, so if he does run against Mayor Lightfoot, what other kind of voters might he attract besides some cops?
I mean, let's be clear. So first of all, Lightfoot, not particularly popular right now, but yes, in comparison to Catanzara with most of the Chicago public, I do think that she would probably have some fun, if you will, during political debates if that were to actually be any sort of matchup. Who would he have on board? You're right, the police. And by the way, his kind of continued path here is interesting, I think, as the police department, people perceive the union, who of course elected Catanzara as their president, that's what people are going to perceive when they have interactions with cops, that he is sort of the face of the CPD. Who else will he get? Perhaps some of these folks who really are upset with the direction the city of Chicago is taking. But I would say the big takeaway here, may not well, particularly if Lightfoot remains as weak as she is now. It may not just be a Lightfoot-Catanzara matchup, that anybody else still could enter this race. It's a ways away. And so that's what really will gauge who would vote for who once we get a better inclination of what that 23 race is going to look like.
Absolutely. So Heather Catanzara, he leads the police union that still has the lowest vaccination rate of city workers at 62%. What does that say? And remind us, what's happening with the FOP's battle with the city over the vaccine mandate.
Well, it shows that the police department has a long way to go to get fully vaccinated, which is, of course, supposed to happen by the end of the year. So we're about a month and a half away from that. And this is all tied up in court. And it's not clear whether an arbitrator will rule in the mayor's favor and allow her to terminate city workers, including police officers who don't comply with the mandate. But it's also clear that the mayor has no appetite to fire thousands of officers, especially when it's, we're in the midst of a crime surge of gun and gang violence. So it's a very fraught situation. And it's not clear, I think, how it all ends up. But it is clear that this resistance to the vaccine mandate is centered in the police department and to a somewhat lesser extent by the fire department, because right now they only have to report their vaccination status, and there are still thousands of officers and hundreds of fire department members who have refused to do that, and some have stopped being paid by the city as a result.
Okay, so heading back to Wisconsin, Paris, while the jury is deliberating in the murder trial of Illinois teenager Kyle Rittenhouse, courthouse demonstrators confronting each other. Paris, you've been covering this for us today. How concerned are folks about violence following the verdict?
They're concerned, but I think to a T, the residents feel that they have a better plan this time to keep things in control. The National Guard has been called, but as you notice, they're not anywhere around the courthouse. They're not visible here. There isn't fencing up because perhaps people worry that that would agitate people even further. But it's really interesting, as you heard residents say, a lot of people here demonstrating do care about the case, but then I think you have a group of folks that are from the outside that the case is kind of secondary, and you'll have like a Black Lives Matter protester and a right-wing militia type of protester jawing at each other, and then a bunch of people go up with cameras and iPhones to try to record it. And you see people streaming their own YouTube shows or their own Periscope shows. And for some of these people, it appears like the trial, the case is kind of a means to advance their own brand, get more followers, go viral. And that's kind of like the bad faith element of what you see, in addition to folks that truly are here that do care a lot about the specifics of this case. So it remains to be seen what we'll see tomorrow, but we'll probably see more of that.
Of course. So an armed Illinois man was demonstrating with a semi-automatic rifle. Tell us what Kenosha County Sheriff's told so-called quote-unquote Maserati Mike.
Yeah, the law enforcement came up to this gentleman who was walking around with a rifle and body armor and camo, and I don't know what they said to him specifically. He left. He did return later, and he was kind of trolling up and down the sidewalk outside the courthouse, not really saying anything. So I didn't I didn't ask him any questions. I don't know really any more about that, but clearly whatever the law enforcement said to him, walking around here with a rifle is a very provocative action when you've got people whose emotions are running high.
Especially. So before we let you all go, Amanda, quickly, Governor Pritzker signed a new election law. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is an election law. Really, it's going to carry over many of the changes that were made previously. But what is different this time around is, first of all, it bans dark money contributions and out-of-state money for judicial races, just for judicial races. And that's an interesting tactic, given that we do expect to see the balance of the Illinois Supreme Court put to voters next year. Right now, Democrats control every facet of Illinois state government, and Republicans really see the Supreme Court as their one opportunity. So that's a big change. And also something that disabled advocates have been really wanting. There is a guaranteed ability for those who are in wheelchair access or need other accessibilities when they are voting to be given that, and then there will be a task force examining disability voting capabilities and rights as well.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. That's Spotlight. Heather Sharon, Amanda Vinicky, and Paris Schutz. Thanks, everybody.